Welcome back to Courageous Conversations. Today I am joined with Pranitha, and we are going to be talking about a topic that will be probably fairly familiar to a lot of young people, as old people say. But it's armchair activism. And first of all, thank you for joining us. But what, by definition, is armchair activism?
Armchair activism initially took on a very negative role where
Right.
people said you're just sitting on a chair and voicing out your opinions and not really doing the work. But I think today people understand the impact, the influence, and that armchair activism can have a purpose. So it is basically using your social media platforms, your friend circles, and your followers to share your opinions and influence how they think.
Right. And you did say how it was defined as a very, very negative thing before. But like you said, I think as of recently, we have seen the change that, especially the younger generation in terms of, Gen Z and millennials have had with the power just by sitting at home and being able to push a cause. But in your field of work in human rights activism and in finding justice for people, how far does the impact of armchair activism go?
I think it kind of sets the basic foundation, which is in any human rights activism, the change of mindset is important. So, as people read opinions, as people get to know or become aware of issues around them, it starts their journey into knowing what the issue is about. So it can work both ways. It can work
Right.
in the negative way as well as positive because there's a lot of information which is not true, and social media can be used to bring injustice into someone's life also. But I think it's important as people, as organizations, that we influence the masses with the truth
Right.
and with awareness. So take domestic violence, child sexual abuse. What I found is people reaching out to us through the social media, through just reading about the cases we've done, or reading about there's a helpline. You know what? How can I
Right.
reach out? So then they're first aware that there is help around. Secondly, they're aware that there's somebody else who is going through what
Right.
I'm going
That they're
through.
not alone.
I'm not alone, yes. And the community themselves, their mindset changes from being judgmental to be more empathetic.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like you said, that it does lay a foundation to allow frontline workers and people who do this beyond just social media, who are out and about in the field, putting their lives at danger. But like you said, it sets the foundation. So once that foundation is set, what can someone who is sitting at home trying to be passionate about a cause, what can they do next?
There are many things you can do, especially during the pandemic. We have seen that there are different categories of people. People who are bound to stay at home, people who can go out, people who can actually, or who have the expertise to do the work that needs to be done. So, as simple as we had a huge network of volunteers helping us during the pandemic. So, the category that could not step out, either because they're single mothers or they're mothers who work from home, disabled, sick, many reasons why they couldn't step out. They had many comorbidities. What they were doing was very critical because they were helping with picking up phone calls, passing on the information, or letting people know which hospitals were
Right.
free, where could they find, medication, etc. And then we had the next category who did not know anything about the subject, but were strong. They were willing to just do the manual work.
Right.
So they would pick up things from point A to point B, drop it off. The third category was the experts. They stepped in and they were able to say, okay, I will take up pro bono work and I will be able to do this. So it's not just knowing about the issue.
Right.
It's actually going one step further. And I believe that anybody who truly empathizes will not stop with just a social media post.
Right.
You get sucked into it.
Correct.
Because as you hear more and you start empathizing with the struggles, with the suffering and the pain, you want to take the next step.
Right.
And it's important. And you do what you can.
Yeah.
No one can expect everything from one person. You can do your bit. Probably you are a student,
Right.
and your parents may not allow you to, be exposed to difficult work or suffering. But you could join a call center, as in, work with an NGO, where you just make calls.
Right.
Or you could, volunteer in a campaign where somebody is putting out information. Go to that. It's difficult to step out of your home and go there, but you are doing that in your free time.
Correct.
So different ways you could participate and go a step further.
Right. And I really like that you pointed out that when you truly empathize with something, when you truly believe, when you truly have belief for a cause, you get sucked into it. And I think that's also one of where I felt like my generation especially lacks a lot in terms of being fully passionate about something to the point where they want to do more than just do the social media posts. And so I have a couple of questions, but firstly, you said that it's about also reading more and learning more about a particular subject. But because social media is so flooded with information, how can one filter out what is a credible source, what is a truthful source, or what can just be utter nonsense that is just there to make a headline?
Yeah, that's a very credible and important question. We work with many young people who come on board. Of course, the work we do is, domestic violence, child sexual abuse, which may not be a place where many young people can directly get involved.
Right.
But they do help us with campaigns and understanding the issue and helping us with bringing awareness, and not the case by itself. So our advice, not just to the students, not just to young people, but to anybody, is to go to websites such as the UN website, which talks about almost every issue is listed there. So there you have experts who have, curated information that is put out. Or you could go to government, like India has a Women and Child Welfare, the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare. Go to the website. You will know everything about the laws in India, how you can help, how you can, what are the resources available, what are the rules in each of the states. You could learn from there. I also encourage you to go to the US websites, government websites, Australian, Canada, because these are governments that have already set up systems that work against the injustices, and it is a functioning system.
Right.
And they've done enough work over the years to come up with the best solutions that are available. So that would filter out any other, you could completely trust them.
Right.
It will filter out the bad information that's there.
And sorry, I just wanted to know, should we be referencing the American laws and the American judicial system and the Australian and the Canadian as a reference point to see how we can adapt those laws for our country? Is that what it is, or is it just a more general knowledge know-how?
Yeah, the Indian laws are quite good.
Right.
Like we have the domestic violence law, we have the POXO, which is for child sexual abuse. So there are laws in India, and obviously laws for the US or Australia don't apply. But like you said, it's good to compare and it's good to reference, because what they may have may be something that's missing in
Right.
our law, so we could, suggest, because the government puts out, um, before they enact a law or a bill is tabled, they do call for public opinion and they circulate. So each of us, every citizen, has a right to share and speak into the law.
Right.
So if we are aware of what's available in other countries, which would be helpful for us,
Right.
we could definitely speak into that.
Sure.
But more than just that, what I look for is the restoration and the rehabilitation part.
Okay.
I feel like we're a bit behind, and we could learn a lot from systems and the best practices of other countries that they have.
Like you said, the internet is global, and what that means is there's so many streams of information that come. How in your experience have you been able to filter out? How have you been able to say, oh, this does not seem correct compared to this? Is it solely by you looking at the few sites that you listed, like the UN and so on, or is there any other way that you've been able to determine that, okay, this may not be credible?
Definitely, I think all of us have a conscience,
Right.
right? So when we look at human rights, the basic understanding is that all of us are born equal. All of us deserve dignity, equality,
Right.
and the basic human rights everyone should have. So there will be times when you may not agree, even with the UN, right? Because everything is evolving. So you would even raise your voice against what the UN has put out. Because I think bottom line is you always measure against the scale whether it's the same for every human being or what is being put out is unfair for some section of society.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there is a basic conscience that you have which speaks out
Right.
when you read something that's not right.
Yeah.
But we are easily, what should I say, we are people at the end of the day, and we can also be easily influenced.
Right. Yeah.
So I have asked and questioned on subjects which maybe, 10, 15 years ago, I had a very different opinion about. And as I questioned and as I heard live stories, I changed my opinion
Right.
because it wasn't fair for some section of society.
Right.
Yeah. To give you an example, I somehow felt that I did not disagree that death penalty, is wrong.
Right.
I was like, why should the prison system burden itself with somebody who deserves to die? Until I met prisoners who had never committed a crime. They were there because they were serving someone else's crime,
Wow. Yeah.
because they are poor and they were easily picked up by the police.
Just scapegoats for something.
Somebody who's rich paid them money and put them in prison.
Wow.
Why should they die? Right? So we never know the truth, and by putting them through the death penalty, you're killing an innocent man.
Right.
So I changed my mind about that's one reason. I mean, there are many other reasons. So I think everything that people put out may not be right or wrong,
Right.
but your conscience speaks, and you need to vet it out. You need to learn for yourself and understand whether it's right or wrong and stand by that.
And you just spoke about how, so you said how a rich person would commit a crime and they'd frame a poor person to do so. But in terms of your field of work with, for example, domestic violence, right? I think an assumption is that it happens a lot with the lower income groups of society. But is that to be the case, or does it happen all across the board in that sense?
Yeah, I think it's all across all strata of communities. We have the rich, the poor. Yeah, it's across. And I would say there are majority of women who are victims or survivors, but there are also men who are victims and survivors, but in a smaller percentage.
Right.
But it's a system that we grew up in. It's very patriarchal. We are taught that men and women are not equal. We're taught that men have different roles, women have different roles.
Right.
And women are expected to be submissive
Right. Yeah.
and not, they don't have the same rights that men have.
Right.
Somehow men are treated or are believed to be the stronger, the better,
Right.
the greater.
Yeah. True.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, to quote so many people, real men don't cry, and things like this it's a very. I feel like it can also trap a lot of men into. For example, if a man has been a victim of domestic violence, what is the difference that he goes through in the way of recovery and rehabilitation, like you said? How is it different for a man than it is to a woman, whether it's mentally, whether it's just in terms of the overall structure that he goes through? What is the difference there?
So it's there's a huge difference. A woman who's going through domestic violence is always asked to stay within the marriage and to adjust. And there's danger to her life even if she leaves.
Right.
But if she stays, it's again dangerous because many of the cases I know, husbands are serving life sentence in prison because in their anger they pushed the wife, she hit her head and passed away. Whereas a husband who is going through domestic violence will immediately get community support, saying, you don't have to live with a woman who's disrespectful to you.
Wow.
Leave, and they will support him, they will take care of his needs, help with the kids if the kids are with him, but not with the woman. The woman is always forced back into the same situation.
Yeah.
And of course, mental health, men struggle to share what they're going through. Like you said, real men don't cry.
Right.
And they're ridiculed when men speak about the violence.
Right.
Like, aren't you man enough to control a woman? So that part of it is sad because less men come forward.
Right.
But equally difficult is a woman's situation because it's all about your family's
Right.
status. And, they will be embarrassed.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to just put up with it.
Right. There's so much pressure
Yeah.
from so many different aspects of,
Correct.
being a good woman and
Yeah.
being a good mother and wife and
Right.
things like this. Wow. So there's different forms of pressure that people feel, right? Both men and women alike, and I'm sure that it can't be easy on either, and there's no way that we can say for sure that women have it worse or men have it worse,
Yeah.
because it's an individual
It's
case,
each individual case.
and I feel like that's something that I've experienced so much, where people assume that it's either worse for a woman in some situations or it's worse for a man in some situations, and I feel like as people who have some sort of influence on social media, we need to be more aware, and we need to be more understanding that it is an individual case.
Yeah.
Right. And just coming back a little bit to armchair activism and what we can do from our homes is, we've covered the extent, but we haven't really covered what are the negatives that happen from it.
So when you're on social media and you're voicing your opinion, especially today, I would say it wasn't there maybe 10 years ago. Or
Yeah.
the trolling,
Right.
the trolls that you have to face, especially if you are a woman, you instantly get trolled for being immature, have no sense, have no
Right.
wisdom, no brains. That's one side of it. So intellectually, you're demeaned.
Right.
The other part is the violence through the social media, which is you get rape threats, you get threats against your family members. If you have children, you get threats against your children. Recently, you saw, Virat Kohli's daughter being.
Right. She's
You know,
10
trolled.
months old, 8 months old, something like that.
She's a toddler,
Toddler.
right?
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared for the mental strain and the stress. If you're unable to manage that, then you need to take a break,
Right.
because that's a negative side of, just armchair activism, and it does actually translate to violence sometimes.
Okay. Yeah.
We have heard cases of people on the internet who were targeted and
Yeah.
even killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there is the negative side,
Right.
and you have to protect yourself against it.
Right. So just because you're doing it from home doesn't mean it's essentially safe.
No.
But is it a risk that is worth taking?
It's a risk that you need to calculate,
Okay.
and you need to see which part of the journey of life you are in. I can speak as a mother of 2 children. Is it worth the risk putting my children out there? And when do I stop and when do I continue? And do I have everything covered before I go on
Right.
line? And if you're someone who's, I would say, calculated the risk and you know that you're covered all your bases, and you can go ahead and do that. Go ahead. Be the voice. Speak up.
And I think we've covered a lot of topics, but one thing we haven't quite yet is what are the limitations that come from armchair activism? Not just in terms of how far a post will reach, how far a repost will reach, but also in terms of the mindset of someone who is an armchair activist in that sense.
I think many people may just settle for, okay, do a post and then do nothing about it after that. I think it requires some responsibility on people. I would love to see more responsibility taken up by people who are posting just opinions, or even reading
Right.
opinions, to go the next step and either connect those they see around in their community who are suffering, be there for them, stand with them, do simple tasks that would help them in their journey. I've seen this a lot. Like I post on my page about during COVID, during domestic violence, where we've seen students who've introduced, a neighbor who's suffering with domestic violence to us, and actually taking the effort to bring them to a place where we can sit and talk
Right.
and go further in helping protect the family from domestic violence. So I think it's important that we not just put out what we think and what is right, but also to take the next steps of connecting, helping them
Yeah.
get out of their situations. And refer cases, refer to NGOs, refer to law enforcement, whatever is possible, but to
Right.
take the next step.
And I think a lot of this ties into a lot of people assuming where their influence is, because we live in an age of influencers and celebrity, and they're held at such a high level, and they're the pinnacle of things, and I think as young people, a lot of times what happens is that we get carried away, and because we idolize these kinds of people, right? We idolize musicians and actors and whatnot, and athletes. I think sometimes we assume that that we can do the same things as them and have the same amount of influence as them. And I think, I suppose this is our call to say that if you're someone who's young, and if you're someone who isn't an influencer in the way that it's your job, I think it's important that we know where our influence really lies. And like you said, it's in picking up the phone maybe being a part of a call center, or it's recognizing that a neighbor's going through something and bringing them to a safe space where they can talk. But I think we as Gen Z, or we as millennials, need to understand that our influence is not an Instagram repost. Our influence is not solely reading about a topic. Our influence is at a micro level where we do. not just read or not just see and not just repost. Um, and so what so like you said, we already went over the initial steps that you can take into doing these things. But a lot of times what happens is that people get sick and tired of doing, because they feel like they can't make a difference. But I'm sure you've dealt with this so many times in your time doing this. And how do you deal with that? What keeps you going?
Yeah. So, you may have voiced out the first time a rape case was known. Next, and it just continues, right? Now you can look at a problem and just get immobilized or freeze and think, I'm too small, I can't do this. And at that time, I'm reminded of the story of the starfish and this man on the beach. There were millions of starfish, the baby starfish on the beach. And this man kept throwing them back into the ocean, saying it made a difference to this one. It made a difference to this one. So that's a mindset I carry, that I am very aware that we cannot reach everybody. We cannot, as individuals,
Right.
change the system,
Yeah.
but you can make a difference to the one. And I think that's how change comes.
Right.
If many drops make the ocean, right? So if each of us can make a difference to the one next to us within our influence,
Right.
yeah, that would be enough.
Right. And I suppose we'll end with this, that be the change that you want to see. Right. I think it ultimately boils down to that.
Yeah.
And how you be the change is up to you to decide.
Yeah.
And it's up to where you are in life. But it is important that you be the change that you want to see.